Hey everybody, welcome to our monthly live roundtable event. Really excited about this one. We are bang on topic, and our topic today is how to structure a killer B2B cold call. Got some of the best cold callers around with me on our conversation today. We'll let everybody do an intro shortly, but firstly, thank you very much for joining us today. If you are joining us, whether that's through registering on the link or just stumbling across it live on LinkedIn, then feel free to add comments, ask questions throughout. We'll try and bring the questions up to the audience. And firstly, thank you for being here. I'll just go around and get everyone to do a really quick introduction of themselves. There is a little bit of a change to the lineup from within Air this month as Marco Alfano-Rogers joins us. Marco's our sales director here at Air Marketing, and Neil's on annual leave this week. But perhaps, Jonathan, I could come to you first. Could you give us a quick 60 seconds? Who's Jonathan Finch? Who's Sales Geek? Tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, big thank you for having me on, Owen. Very good afternoon, everybody. My name's Jonathan Finch. I lead the sales team over at Sales Geek. I also lead our delivery team as well. So as a business, we help organizations all across the world create more revenue. We do that by providing training, assistance with strategy, consultancy services, and ultimately parachuting into businesses and making their sales engine run faster. Was that 60 seconds?
That was succinct. That was like 30 seconds.
That's more 6, wasn't it?
I know. Well, you've got something to live up to now, Alex. So, Alex Shrimpton, off you go.
Alex Shrimpton. I now work at Infinity Call Tracking, which it's a direct marketing software. I've been in sales for probably about 10 years. Started in door-to-door. Worked through that for about 5 years. I've trained over 500 people on probably 30 different campaigns, ranging from ADT to Scottish Power, installation. I've also done Love Film. Moved into B2B sales about 5 years ago. Started with Lead Forensics, moved on to Vulio, and now I'm at Infinity. So I've worked all the way through SME style sales, all the way up to enterprise sales, where I'm at now. And now I've also helped train some of the SDR team here, and help shape some of the training structure that they go through.
Love it. Marco, do you want to give a quick 30 seconds? I'll give you 30. I've done this first bit for you. 30 seconds on your role and your experience around this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marco Alfano-Rogers, I'm our sales director. Been in sales for the most part of my career. Started off as a BDE, worked my way through up to account management. Ran the outbound sales team at Air. Ran the account management team, and I'm now our as I say, sales director. So effectively responsible for onboarding new clients.
Fantastic. And one of the things I love about this panel, and it's been finally put together, as you can see, is the fact that we've got Jonathan, who I've seen train and has trained many of our team on cold calling. Marco, who I've witnessed the sorts of results he can get from outbound cold calling campaigns, and to this day still remains one of my top 5 that I've worked with. That's a compliment, Marco. And I don't think he even knows why sometimes. So it'll be interesting to see if we can get that out of his head today. But just one of those things we can do it. And then Shrimper Alex, who I've had a cold call from and I've bought from. So, I mean, talk about first-hand experience and credibility there. So it's going to be interesting to hear the differences of opinion, the variety of ways that we approach it. I just want to set the scene a little bit today, because we're talking about how to structure a killer B2B cold call. One of the things that will always come into this conversation is the fact that you've got to think about data, you've got to think about, social selling, you've got to think about all these other things, researching prospects. We know, right? We know, but for the sake of this conversation, we're just going to ignore that stuff, because we want to focus on making the assumption that we've got a decision maker on the phone. They're in the right kind of organization. They are the right kind of profile, right kind of person. They're involved in the decision making process. We really want to structure it, focus in on the structure of that conversation. What do we say? How do we say it? What are the questions that we ask? All those sorts of things. So let's jump in. We're there, right? We're there now. We've done the hard bit. We've got through the gatekeeper. We're in. Somebody answers the phone. He or she is our ideal prospect. Alex, I'm going to come to you first, put you on the spot. What's the first thing that comes out of your mouth? I'm going to unmute you. You need to unmute yourself, mate.
I'd say thank you so much for taking the call. I appreciate it. I've probably caught you right in the middle of something.
Okay. And what's your logic behind that?
So I actually watched this on a LinkedIn video probably about 2-3 years ago, and it was a fundamental change for me because right up until that point I'd be, you know, hi, I'm calling from Lead Forensics, hi, I'm calling from Vulio, blah blah blah. And for me that was such a psychological change there, because actually it was me appreciating that, you know, they're busy and that they're taking time out of their day-to-day job. They're not sat there at the other end of the phone waiting for someone to call in and sell them something. So actually that change in mindset of, okay, thank you so much for taking the call number one, because you didn't need to pick it up. And, you know, you've obviously interrupted your day-to-day job to pick up that call. So that's why I'm saying I'm appreciating that you're in the middle of something. So it's kind of, it's appreciating their time, but then it's also kind of preempting an objection that might come up later on.
So one of my jobs in this conversation is to challenge people a little bit and just try and really get under the skin of it. So what would you say to somebody who said there's a little bit of subservience in there that actually, and I hear both sides of this, you know, I think your point is it helps build trust. It helps people to say, actually, I'm being upfront with you. I'm being honest. I know your time's valuable, and that helps build trust. The other side could be, and I've heard this argument as well, that actually it makes your status lower because you're going in, making it almost feel like it's a less valuable thing. And if it was valuable enough, you wouldn't be apologetic about it. Any comeback to that?
Not really. I'm always wanting to be conscious. I'm always wanting to be professional. I'm always wanting to be polite. Yeah. And I've been the guy who, when I've knocked on a door and someone said, I'm busy, you know, I've got a kid in the next room who's just thrown up, you know, my dad's just divorced my mom. I've just stepped on a Lego brick as I've answered the door. I don't have time. And in that case, I'm like, you know, don't worry, I'll come back later.
Yeah.
And in loads of scenarios like that, I've actually gone back later on in the day, knocked on the door, and they said, oh, you're that guy who knocked earlier. I'm so sorry I couldn't give you the time. And then they're a lot more appreciative of it. So that's the kind of side of things that I suppose in my mindset, it's being professional, it's being appreciative.
You did well, mate. You did well. My job's just to ask the questions, so absolutely love it. Jonathan, let's bring you in if you're okay to come on. Same sort of approach, something different?
Completely different. I'll be completely honest. I go completely the other side of that. If I'm going to be cold calling someone, I greet them like I already know them and they already know me. So if I was ringing Owen, I'd answer the phone. Hi, is that Owen? Let's role play here, Owen. Role play with me. Hi, is that Owen?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Owen, Jonathan at Sales Geek. How you doing? You all right?
All right. How are you?
I greet someone like I already know them, like they already know me, and I can almost hear the cogs turning in their head. Who is this person? Straight away for me, it puts you on their level, and it just opens up that conversation a lot easier for me. I always find if I sort of go in with anything too formal, it's immediately the going to cold call, probably going to try and sell to me. It all comes down for me for that opening, the tone on it though. If you don't greet someone in the right tone, like they know you, like you know them, and it's simple things, smile while you dial. But that for me, if you can get that opener out there, this person straight going, like, normally if you do that opening to someone, they'll go, oh yeah, I'm good, Jonathan. How are you? And they're still trying to work out in their head, who is this person who's calling me? But at the same point, you've started that conversation off almost on the right level, if that makes sense. Yeah. You've started off with the right energy level and got them thinking straight away, you're on the same level. Let's have a conversation.
Do you know, I can see us getting fired up with different opinions on this. Doesn't
always work. I was going to add. Yeah, I was going to add.
Go on. Go, Shabbat. That's the idea. It's a round table.
So anyone who I've trained in the last year or so as well, the next line out of my mouth is actually being completely honest. This is a cold call. Have you got just 27 seconds so I can tell you why I called?
Fine. He's been reading.
So absolutely, completely opposite end of the scale to Jonathan there.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, can I just go back to your thing? So, I think you've hit the nail on the head with one major point there that we should stop and acknowledge, which is around tone. And in my experience, what you say is a part of it. The way that you come across, the way you say it, is a much bigger part a lot of the time. And I've seen successful reps using both of your approaches and people using them and being hugely unsuccessful as well. So, there is no magic bullet. It's the same as anything in sales. Same kind of challenge to you, Jonathan. What would you say to them? Because the how are you thing is a fairly controversial thing. In my experience, there are people who can deliver it and get away with it, but there are definitely people who can't. And I think part of that is, having a cheeky northern accent might help you in this scenario. I don't know, but certainly if I deliver it, I tend to get a cold, almost feels insincere. It feels like I'm asking a question to fill time, and you've got 6-7 seconds to make an impression, and they're already forming an image of you. And if you're wasting 2 or 3 seconds asking a question that actually is fairly routine, I don't really want to know the answer, could easily be criticized as being insincere. Why would I use that valuable time for that? So have you got any pushback? Is it just something that works for you? Have you seen it work for others?
Definitely works for me. One of the reasons being 99% of the time, like if you're cold calling in the UK, we're British, we're polite. You go, how's it going? You all right? You go, yeah, very well, thanks. Next thing out of their mouth is, how are you? So that's great, because now they've asked you a question and you've got a chance to, I don't want to say rapport build there, but you've got a chance to start that conversation off. This is one that I used to repeat every call, every day in, day out. It's really cheesy, but it used to work really well for me. Was if it was Monday or Tuesday, I'd go, yeah, not so bad. We've almost reached Wednesday. It's apparently all downhill from there. Or it was past Wednesday. I'd go, yeah, not bad. We've made it past Wednesday lunchtime. It's apparently all downhill from here. It was the same thing. People in the office used to be like, and he's using that line again. He's doing the same thing over and over. But it was always just something that made people laugh or made people grin and go, yeah, no, I can't wait for the weekend. You've got that tone going now that it's a friendly conversation. I'm not there to ring you to take money off you. I'm there to have a conversation with you. Yeah. And if you can start it off with that tone, for me, it always made the call a heck of a lot easier as you were moving forward with it. And as you move on to the next steps, if you just had that opening, it was friendly. It was like someone that you already know greeting you. Your guard's a little bit more down. You're a bit more open to have that conversation with them rather than straight away holding the phone at sort of edge going, yeah, can you shout me? I need to get away. It's cold call.
So my advice to people on this, if you're watching or listening to this, would be cautious around if you're going to use that, actually meaning it. So in my experience, because we deliver that phrase so many times in a day and a week because we are British and that's the way that we talk to each other, probably 90% plus of the time we actually don't listen to the answer. We don't know the answer. So if you're going to use it, you've got to practice it sounding authentic, because otherwise it becomes a filler and it's using fairly valuable space right up the top of the conversation. Marco, I'll come round to you. Anything different to add? Anything you do that the guys haven't mentioned?
Yeah, I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here as usual. My approach is probably more permission based. So it'd be effectively, hi Owen, it's Marco calling from Air Marketing. You and I haven't spoken before. I was hoping you might be able to help me out for a moment. So psychologically, most people are going to say, yeah, of course. What can I do for you? So I think naturally we're going to be on the front foot with that. I mean, you've got to be a certain character saying, no, I can't help you. But so naturally, most people are going to say, yeah, you're on the front foot. And then it's a case of going into your introduction. But yeah, slightly different to the other two. To be honest, I think it comes down to the delivery, doesn't it? As you were saying, I think all three are going to work, but it's being confident and it's potentially mirroring that initial decision maker that you talk to. All three will work. It's how you deliver it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Shrimbo looks like he's taking himself off mute. Go on.
Can I add? Yeah, I was going to add. So I think because both Jonathan and Mark are absolutely right. I do think there's another level that we need to consider here, is that actually it's the level of people you're pitching to.
Yeah, agreed,
and that's definitely something that, from what Jonathan's saying, from what Marco's saying, as I've gone through B2B sales from SME through to mid-market through to enterprise, actually the way that I'm pitching and the way I can have a conversation with someone is much different. Like if I was on someone's doorstep and I was pitching for a charity subscription and I'm knocking on and I answer the door, I'm super bubbly, I'm super excited. Hey, how are you? You having a good day? Blah, blah, blah. And it'd be a lot more friendly and a lot more less formal because of the product, because of the demographic I'm speaking to. As I was in the SME space, as you know, Owen, it was really informal. I was, hey, Owen, how's things? You've been well, blah, blah, blah. I see you've just set up like 2 days ago in the UK. How was Australia? Blah, blah, blah. And it was a much different conversation. Now, if I'm pitching to someone like a CMO, it is, and that's I think the reason why I've kind of tailored and developed it more into that kind of pitch of, I'm thankful for your time. I appreciate that you're busy, because it's, I mean, like, now, you've got 3 million things you're doing at once. You don't have time to kind of take out your day to give to this person. It's a lot to take on.
Yeah, I think it's a really valid point, Alex. Thank you. A really valid point. Jonathan, Marco, any go on?
Can I chip in on that? I'd never apologise for taking up someone's time. I'd never ring them up and apologise for taking up someone's time. Main reason being, if I'm reaching out to someone to cold call them for a product which I think will be beneficial, I think they should be thanking me for ringing them. That's what I want.
That's status thing, isn't it?
I would never. My time is as valuable as that person's time. If I'm ringing a VP of sales of a big organization offering to help them with training, I'd never thank them for the time, because I honestly feel like we've got a really good product, we've got a really good service. If I'm reaching out to them, it's because I've done some research on them, and they should be. I'm not saying that they're going to thank me, but my time's as valuable as theirs is. And again, I think it's that level thing. If ever I'm pitching anybody, I want them to see me on the same sort of level, because they'll respect my advice. If I'm sort of lower down the chain than them when I'm going up and doing that sort of a pleading pitch to them, for me, that then turns it into they're not really going to respect my advice as much, and they're not going to ask me for as much, which makes it difficult. The other thing I was just going to go back to, which I didn't mention, I always use first names. Whenever you ring somebody, I always, hi, is that Dave? Dave, it's Jonathan at Sales Geek. Again, it's that friendly sort of tone. It's a small thing, but I've seen it before. Is that Mr. Such a Body on B2B calls? I'm thinking, you've just killed that straight away.
I totally agree. I'm going to defend Trimper here, because, John, I actually agree with you. I think there's a status thing, but I think Alex's example, there is a difference between being apologetic, and I think I planted that word earlier, and making a statement. So I think the approach that Alex takes, which is a fairly widely used approach, is more around, look, I know, I think the Connect and Sell example is a great one, and you hear Jerry Hill talk about this all the time, and he's been on this show and talked about it, where he talks about, I know I'm an interruption. That's not an apology, it's a statement. It's a fact that actually I'm acknowledging it, and I'm moving on past it. I'm not stopping on it. Versus where I think people do get it wrong is, oh, I'm really sorry, I know you're probably busy, or please can I have a bit of your time, because I know you're a busy person. It's like, oh, you're just undervaluing yourself straight away. So I think it's important to differentiate between those two, but I think you're spot on with that point there, Jonathan.
That's literally all I was going to say off the back of that. I was going to say there's a very big difference between asking for an apology and saying you're thankful and grateful.
Love it. Good stuff. All right. Well, if everyone's happy, let's move on. We've got some different ways you can introduce yourself. I think what we've all done though, and I think let's just acknowledge this out loud, we haven't just gone into a pitch, right? We've not just dived in. We are inviting them into the conversation. And I think there's a really key point there around, hey, I'm giving you something that lasts 2, 5, 10 seconds, and now you're in the conversation. That's a trust builder. It's saying, this is two-way. I want to listen to you as well as talk with you. And there's a lot of reason for doing that. But you also start to, Marco touched on earlier, get a sense of the tone of voice and the personality, which allows you to naturally mirror people as you go into the next part of the conversation. So we've done our, how's it going from Jonathan? We've got, from Alex, we've got our, have 27 seconds to tell you why I've called. Marco saying, just hoping you can help me out for a moment. So we've got 3 really nice options for you there. I say, yeah, go for it. You can have your time. Yeah, I'm happy to help. Or, yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Jonathan. How are you? Yeah, I'm great. Cool. So why are we calling? What's the next thing that comes out of your mouth? Jonathan, I'll come to you because I went to Alex first last time.
Again, I won't be pitching straight away here. And this again, it depends, I suppose, what you're pitching and what you're going into. But for me, my next part will be to qualify and get the person that I'm speaking to tell me they are the right person to speak to. Because you always sometimes get at the end of the pitch, the person goes, oh, yeah, I love the idea of it. It's not me you need to speak to, though. And you've done half an hour on 20 minutes on that pitch sometimes. The next thing out of my mouth will be one of 2 things. I just wrote these 2 down. One, I did some research on LinkedIn, and I believe that you're the person that leads on X, Y, and Z. I believe you're the person that leads the sales force in the UK and would be in charge of learning development. Is that right? You're getting a yes out of the person straight away. As many yeses as you can get in a cold call. Fantastic. It's moving you along the process. The other one, and this depends on how you go about it, but when we used to do quite a lot of research calling organizations, and we go through to people and say, I'm looking to speak to whoever's in charge of X, Y, and Z. I found such a body on LinkedIn. It's really good if when you call that decision maker, you can say, I spoke to one of your colleagues. I spoke to whatever person's name was. I spoke to Hannah in HR who said, you're the person that leads on this. Is this correct? It just shows 2 things to me. 1, you've done a little bit more research to start with. And 2, that it's someone internally at their organization that has recommended you speak to them. Now, that only works if you have done that. You've just been on LinkedIn and you found them. Just say that you've done that. But that was something that always worked really well for me. If I could say one of my colleagues mentioned that this was who I should speak to. Again, getting them to qualify. Yes, I am the person who leads the sales team. Doesn't always happen. But at the end of that, they'll normally go, how can I help? Brilliant. They've asked me, how can I help? So I'm into that conversation then. But that first bit for me would always be qualify. Is this the right person to speak to? If it's not, save yourself half an hour. Go and speak to someone else. Or ask them, oh, sorry, who is it I need to speak to? Oh, it's such a body. Do you want the mobile number? Can I have the mobile number? At least you know you're on the right track.
Nice. So we're actually talking about a little bit of personalization. And I think this will be a topic that would have come up today anyway, which is around how much research do we do, all that kind of stuff, which, we don't want to get too dragged into it, so we want to focus on the conversation. But let's assume this is a conversation that we're having to repeat. What we're saying is a little bit of personalization, something just to differentiate, something just to make it about them rather than just generic pitch all the time, can go a long way, but just be cautious of getting into spending 20 minutes of research for a 2-minute phone call. You don't get hold of somebody. So I think it's a really interesting point. Alex, do you want to get your elevator or whatever you do next?
So I actually kind of lead with the same. Off that first part there, I'd clarify just to make sure it is the right person. I can see the CMO. Would I be right in assuming that you kind of handle all the digital marketing? That comes into you, or is there someone else who would? That clarification out of the way. As an organization, and I've only really been introduced to this challenger theory really within the last kind of year or so, but we're challenger led. So again, it's very much kind of leading on customer learning, customer teaching, that kind of element there. So it's leading on expertise. So we'll lead with, I head up the utility space here at Infinity. Obviously, there's been a wave of change in the utility space over the last year. Wholesale gas prices are changing massively. Is that affecting you as a business as well? Yes. And basically, I'm going through what we call a 5-step pitch. So intro, short story, presentation, close, and consolidation. And this is just something, as a theory, I've had right the way back from door-to-door sales. It's something that allows you to, from a training perspective, you can see you get into the presentation and you're falling short. If you get into the close and you're falling short, it allows you to kind of drop that pin in the dirt to say, look, that's where I got to. And if you're consistently getting to that point, you can see where the problems are beforehand. So that's part of that presentation piece there. It's me explaining, I'm the relevant person here. I understand your space. I understand your challenges. I understand your worries. And that'd be my short story.
Nice. Marco, I'll come around to you. I'll throw challenges around afterwards. Let's hear everybody's first.
My approach is more assumptive. So I've always taught the guys to assume that person is the right person to talk to. And we did a bit of research on this, and the feedback that we were getting when asking that question, are you the right person? Do you look after? Sometimes people assume that they hadn't done their research. So we're going to go into the call, assume that person is the right person to talk to, be confident about that approach, that we're talking to the right person. And what we do is effectively going to help him or her. So it's very much a case of, I'm calling from X. We help companies achieve X, Y, Z. Now, I appreciate you've probably got something in place at the moment, but I've got a couple of questions to see if what we do can actually help you. If it can't, then I won't bother you again. Is that fair? So it's a nice and short, simple kind of intro elevator. It doesn't give too much away, but enough for us to get into a position where that decision maker effectively says, yeah, okay, ask me some questions. And then obviously we'll talk about that shortly, but that's typically how I'd approach it.
So Jonathan, we probably haven't given you the chance to do the next bit because you kind of went, I don't go straight in. This is what I do. Let's assume you have got the right person. And they say, yeah, I look after that. What's for you next?
So it depends on how you're going outbound on this. If you're just calling off a data list and you've not done any research, I mean, people who are listening to this might be just calling off data lists. They don't have too much information. My background was more, we were self-sourcing leads. So we went out and found leads. So we just always used to make sure that we had a hook and an angle. Whatever that thing was, it might be finding something off the website. We did a lot of sales in exhibitions and conferences. So I would always have a reason to speak to that person about why they should come to this conference. Say, for example, it was an education conference. I would want to talk to them around a specific budget that had been reduced, and we used to use budget, policy, and timescale. The perfect hook and angle, have a budget in it, a policy in it, and a timescale in it as to when this policy was going to be done. So the person had to act on it. But I'd always have within that something that was relevant specifically to them, and this probably won't be as relevant to anyone who's just dialing off data lists. But doing that little bit of research beforehand on that client and saying, the reason I'm reaching out to you is because I saw this on your website. For us, for example, one thing that I'm always looking for, if I see that companies online are doing big recruitment campaigns for salespeople, I'm going, what are they doing for their onboarding? I know we can add a lot of value, both to getting those people up to scratch very quickly, but also making sure that the retention rate's really good and they work. So when I'm calling up, that's normally one of the things I'll start with. I noticed online that you guys have been doing a lot of recruitment recently for sales execs or for SDRs. as an organization, we help businesses all across the world with onboarding, with training and development to help their reps get up to speed quicker. Then I'd always launch into an open question. Has to be an open question at the end of that. What is it at the moment that you're going to find? What is it at the moment that is going to be most challenging for you personally with onboarding your reps? It's a bit of a leading question because I'm assuming they're going to have a challenge. Everyone's got a challenge if you make them think about it. But it would be something that would be in line with something that I have seen about that organization, about that company. I'm a big believer that spending 30 seconds, 60 seconds scrolling down someone's profile about what they've posted, scrolling down their news section on the website, there's so many things you can pick up on there that turns it from this is a cold call from someone just dialing to me to this is someone who's really reached out to me because they've done some research, they really think they can help me. That completely changes it for me.
So what's interesting there is, barring Jonathan, your point, and Alex, you kind of agree with this, the notion of actually just checking in and making sure you're talking to somebody who's worth talking to. We're effectively moving into, we refer to it as an elevator. I mean, you hear it as all sorts of different things, but we're moving into a series of words, sentences. We're limiting it to some degree in length that achieve a goal. What should we not be doing in that part? So I'm guessing, the obvious ones are out there is go on for too long because you've only got so much time. What's the sort of optimum time you're looking for? Alex, do you want to go first? What sort of time frame do you think you've got there where people are listening to you?
I genuinely believe that you have 7 seconds to impress on someone. And that's why that intro piece for me is so short, succinct. I want to instill a professional mindset in that conversation right out the gate.
Yeah.
Then into that short story bit, that's probably going to be up to 20 seconds maybe.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be in that scenario where I'm almost stuck in the mud to a degree where it's like I've put myself here, I can't move now. I want to make sure that I've given them opportunity to contribute to that conversation as soon as so like Jonathan was just saying there, I want to get that yes train going. I want to be getting yeses from them, conversation from them. I want to be leading them down that path and having that conversation in the right way, which is going down my talk track. That's what I want to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. I'd say probably 20 seconds or so at max.
Anyone? I think you're in and around the right zone. Anyone feel strongly that that's the wrong kind of time? Otherwise, we'll just move on. No. Cool. Brilliant. I agree. I think, that's your max, isn't it? It's short and sharp. And my advice to people around that is say it out loud, because you'd be surprised how quickly 20 seconds goes when you're talking. And I've seen people try and write, I've done this example, try and write 20 seconds worth of words without reading it out loud, and it'll be about a minute long. So it's something, go on, Jonathan.
On this one, it bemuses me why people, exactly what you said there, will go on for too long, why people don't use the voice recorder on the phone more. I used to do it too when we were onboarding reps. Listen to yourself on board, literally do your introduction as if you're speaking to a client. Listen to it back. It's corny. It's horrible to listen to. No one hates listening back to. No one likes listening back to their own voice. But using your voice recorder, you can see what your tone's like and go, this is what the other person on the other side of the phone is going to get. And I'm not a fan of scripts. I hate scripts. Not a fan of it. Pitches are brilliant. They keep you on track, and it's stuff to go back to if you need some questioning. Great. But I used to get the reps to constantly be going back over themselves, thinking, would you want to speak to you after that? Listen back to that to yourself. Would you want to speak to you and engage for another 10, 15 minutes after that introduction? The answer is no. Got to go back and redo it.
Nice. I think it's a really good piece of advice. Any other sort of do's and don'ts in that part of the conversation?
One thing I was going to add actually, and it was just I think we've talked quite a lot around actually over the phone cold call, which I think one thing that maybe a lot of people actually out there aren't considering is that door-to-door element, that face-to-face element as a cold call. In things like networking and things like actually going down the street, if you're selling something like a payment machine or something like that, you could quite well be going into a business or a corner shop and asking to speak to someone. So actually, one thing that I think as a do that I did when I was selling payment machines was actually using something like Jones effect. I've spoken to Dave, I've spoken to Bill, I've spoken to June, these 3 shops down the road here. They found that they were doing this. This is how we've solved that problem for them. And that was something that I think as a presentation element actually instilled a lot of confidence. And that is something I think you can start to feed in a little bit in that place. In Infinity, we work in sectors, sector specialisms. So it's quite easy for us to have that kind of rapport and that kind of industry knowledge there to talk about something like the wholesale gas price changing or, the price cap, those kind of things changing. So actually that's very specialist, but actually for that particular person, you need to get to that level of understanding, which I think is something that Jonathan was going on to, which was around actually having a look through their profile, having a look through their news. And I think that's an important, I suppose, habit that a lot of people don't really take into account. We're talking about what's going on the call, but actually if you're prospecting for 3-4 hours, getting into the habit of, whilst you're dialing that company, jumping onto their website whilst it's ringing to have a look through their news, bringing up their LinkedIn profile as soon as you've dialed that number, having a look at what they've commented on, what they've interacted on, what they've posted, those kind of things. So then you can have a more relevant conversation.
Just go on. I was just going to say, just to add to the don'ts, given this is a pretty sensitive part of the conversation, what we don't want to do is go in there and give too much away to start with. So I've had so many calls where it's, right, I'm calling from X, we do this, we do that, and this is how we do it. And you've effectively given away the entire call. We want to go in there with the kind of carrot and stick example, and we want to give enough for them to say, okay, this is worth continuing, but not too much that they say, we've got that, we've done it in house, we've heard this before, kind of thing. So that's definitely a don't. Don't give too much away. I
think you touched on something earlier, Marco, which kind of feeds into that. And just quickly, Alex, on your point, I really like that example around the shops and that sort of stuff. But I think that carries into the phone base as well. We already work with these people. We've got 4 examples, and that leads nicely into to Marco's point around talking about how we help you rather than talking about what we do. So there is a big difference between the outcome and the process. And I think a lot of sales scripts, cold calls that I get talk about the process. We do this. We have a piece of software that helps you that does this. You press a button. Don't care. What do I get at the end of it?
Exactly.
Whereas if you phone somebody and said, "Hey, I'm Owen Calder, I can make you £1 million," right? I'm going to listen to that because it's something different. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to have a conversation with you. It's different. It engages me, and it's talking about an outcome that I'd quite like. Let's be fair. If you said, "Right, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to help you with this and that and the other," it's too much, and I'm already starting to make assumptions around it. So I think it's a really good point. Focus the messaging in on what I'm going to help you to achieve. So there's a couple of ways of doing that, and guys jump in on this. There's we help companies to achieve X, or there's typically our clients have these kinds of challenges, and then looping that back to, and what we've been able to do is X, Y, and Z. We're not talking about how yet. We're just talking about the end result. Anyone anything to add on that? Either commentary or challenge or whatever.
I think that's actually something that feeds into objection handling quite well. I think that's something that a lot of people don't kind of cover off, especially in training. I don't think it's covered off enough. I don't think pitch practice is done enough. I don't think that kind of from a very junior level of, I'm on the phone for 9 hours a day doing 200 plus dials. That element, I think, is something that needs to be focused on more. Actually building that habit of being able to react to what they're saying, and that whole analogy of being in the ring, training for boxing, like if you can see someone's moving left, you moving right, that kind of thing. It's having that instant kind of subconscious reaction that what you need to do. You don't need to cognitively think about it to know what I need to say next. But I think that what you're saying about their own is actually using that knowledge to then interact with that objection. So we use agree, isolate, re-impulse, close. So I completely agree with what you're saying, and it's kind of going through that, this person has had this problem, they found that was their issue. I understand how you feel. This is how they found it. This is what actually was the result, and this is how we changed it.
Nice. We'll get onto objections a bit more later, but I think it's a really good point. Jonathan, anything else in that elevator around, anything else you'd be looking to achieve in that, either do or don'ts again, and then we'll move on?
No, I mean, main tip for me is personalization within it. I mean, I was just thinking back. One of our directors, who was one of the best cold callers I've quite literally ever worked with, he used to go about it completely differently, and he'd start getting the client to talk about their services by saying, "I'm just on your website at the moment, and I was just looking at X, Y, and Z. I just want to find out a bit more about how that works, really." And he'd get them talking about their services. He wouldn't really give too much information about why he was calling. He'd wait until he'd done his fact find, then educate at the end. And it's complete spin on. I couldn't really pull it off. It was never one that worked for me. But it was a really good way of getting the person talking. I mean, if I rung you at the moment, Owen, or Marco, got in contact with you guys and said, "I'm just on the Air's website at the moment. I just want to find out a bit more about X, Y, and Z." You're going to pretty much answer any questions that I've got. You're assuming at that point, it's a bit of a cheeky technique, that I'm a buyer. And I've got to make sure when I turn that around at the end, say, I'm not a buyer. This is the reason I'm calling, because we work in partnership, or we're looking for organizations to work with like yourself, depending on why you call in. But it was just another way of getting that person to start with to open up, because once you've got them rolling and talking, that's when you can start pulling all the information. I'm jumping on to the next bit now, but from your fact find.
Yeah, very interesting, very brave approach. I have to say
Very
that.
brave, yeah.
Very brave, yeah. So you touched on something that moved us along a bit, and I'm going to keep moving us along around. Your next question would be an open question. Wholeheartedly agree with that. There's something that I know Marco will want to bring in at this stage, having worked with him for so long, around asking permission to ask questions, because I think that it's lovely to go into questions. In my experience, it's quite a nice thing to do, to kind of have a little break and a pause in the conversation and lead into the questions with a bit of permission. Marco, do you want to just talk around that quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to the elevator into the questioning. It's, look, I appreciate you've probably got something in place at the moment, but I want to ask I've got a number of questions to see if what we do might help you guys. If it doesn't, I won't bother you again. Is that fair? Again, that's that permission based. You know what? Yeah, it is fair. Fire away kind of thing. Psychologically in this conversation too far, we've asked twice if we can engage in conversation. Second time round, you're into the conversation and firing away open questions.
Yeah, nice. And I think there's another example around saying to somebody, I don't know, we've got a different approach we use here, which is, obviously I don't know enough about your situation to know if something like this would even make sense. So mind if I ask you a couple of quick questions? Really throw away, really casual. It's a lovely way to get people in. And I think what I like most about it is, you could argue there's a trust thing. It's bringing them, it's inviting them back into the conversation at a really important part. I've said my pitch. I've said what we're going to help you with. I'm now giving you the chance to effectively say, no, go away, or yes. And I think what's nice about that approach is when you get a yes, you can kind of go, well, they've heard that what I do and how I can help, and they're happy to keep talking to me. It gives you a little bit of a confidence boost. And also, if they're definitely going to say no, it doesn't save you asking 6 questions and then finding out later. You deal with it there and then, and you've got an objection right in front of you, or a very clear no, and you save yourself some time. So I think a really, really important point. Jonathan, I'm going to come back to you, because you had a question that you started with. I can't remember what it was, but you gave an example question that was a kind of something around challenges. There must be a theme in that first question or two that you ask. I guess there's a thought process behind that for you.
Yeah, it would depend on why I'm calling the organisation and the research that I've done beforehand. But a key one here, you mentioned the word challenge. Challenge for me is such a great way to get people to open up. If you ask someone what's the biggest issue you've got, straight away, I haven't got any issues, no issues at all on my side. Why are you thinking I've got any issues? That's what's going on in people's head. Everyone's got something that's going to be a bit of a challenge. It's a word that we all like to go, yeah, I've got a challenge with. It's something that I'm going to overcome. But asking them at the start around that particular thing, for me, again, if it was, I'd seen that they were onboarding a load of reps and I thought we could really help them with some of the online resources or whatever. I'd go, what is it that you think is going to be most challenging for you guys? Or what are you finding at the moment is the biggest challenge to get them from 0 to top performing in 3 months or however long you're trying to do it in? That for me, again, it gets them opening up and gets them thinking. Maybe they haven't sat there themselves and thought, what are the challenges going to be? Maybe I do need to have a think about doing some training or some coaching with them. It gets them thinking about a problem that you can solve. And once they start thinking about this might be a problem, or I have a problem, or there is going to be a problem here, that's when it becomes very easy for you to fit in your solution. The key thing I'd say here, and I used to do this, was I'd come up with 3 or 4 different questions. So the start of my pitch, when I was constantly cold calling day in, day out, I used to get very bored with it. And I had to turn it into a bit of a game. And I would literally have 3 or 4 different opening questions, and I'd have them written down on a pad, 1, 2, 3, or 4, A, B, C, and D. And as I'm going through them through the day, I'd try different ones. And then at the end of the day, I'd say that one worked. I got 5 green ticks next to that one. The other 2 didn't. And you can start split testing your own sales pitch. And just refining it down to pretty much a point where you're always going to get a good response off someone. Or if you've not got a good response, you've got something to come back with from there. But most salespeople, in my opinion, don't spend enough time analysing the structure that they've got. They get the structure given from their organisation, which is the best that they've hopefully done or split tested. But then if you can carry on doing that and turn it into something that you're getting better results on using a bit of science, because cold calling, let's be honest, it's a mixture of an art and a science. It's those 2 things together. But if you can start analysing your own pitch and what works, it's not going to take long before you're sat next to your colleague on your left and your right, and you're getting better results.
Jonathan, you've hit the nail on the head on those questions. What we don't want to do is go in there and basically say, look, tell me about all of your business pain points, all of your business challenges. We want to go in there with a set of structured questions whereby we know the answers that they're going to give us are effectively what we can do to help. And that comes down to the research in terms of, the businesses that you're calling, the individuals that you're actually targeting. You know that the questions you ask them, you're going to have something up your sleeve to say, that's interesting. I think we might be able to help you.
Absolutely.
And I fully agree with both your points there. That's Challenger at the end of the day. That is literally it. It's leading down that path to your own strengths. But it's it's focusing on big relevant change. What's a big relevant change in your industry? What are the winners doing? What are the losers doing? And what's the outcome of that? And then here's the tease of the promised land. How is it that we could maybe look to help with that?
It's a really good point. Okay, I just want to touch on something around questions, because one of the things that I experience, and I don't know if you feel the same, is, and it kind of leads back to our discussion earlier about how we use stuff, is that I think people just go through the process a fair amount. They tend to ask the question. They've got a list of questions they want to get through, and it's almost like a survey. And you feel like, is this person actually listening, or are they just doing what they think they need to do to do their job? I think that the power in questioning for me is right question, right time. Well, tone of voice, all that kind of stuff. But it's also that kind of that verbal listening, that kind of, okay, that makes sense, repeating back and asking what we call secondary questions. So tell me why that's happened. What's caused that? What have you tried to fix it? How did that work? Why didn't it work? All that kind of stuff that comes after one question. And in my experience, that's just from being naturally curious, naturally interested in talking to people rather than following the process. Jonathan, do you want to add some commentary on that?
I think it comes down to exactly what you said there. It's got to be genuine. I mean, for me personally, I absolutely love my job. I love speaking to other companies. I love finding out about the problems, the challenges. I love even more helping them solve them. But for me, I find it fascinating. When I'm ringing someone up, I'm genuinely interested about how they do things, because you can learn so much personally on that. I mean, organization A and organization B in the exact same industry, turning over the exact same revenue, will probably be doing it in two completely different ways. One of them might be bringing all the leads in via email, and that's their main source of revenue generation. The other one might not do anything on email. It's all done by cold call. And you might have organization C that's got a multi-channel approach to each of those. I find that fascinating, finding out from people, how do they run the business? How does that work? What works, what doesn't? And for me, I think I'm naturally curious, but I really enjoy that part of the process. The fact find for me isn't part of the process that you've got to get through, the 5 questions I'm trying to get through so I can say my bit at the end of it. It's the most interesting part of the pitch, and it's the most valuable for me personally. I learn so much from doing that, from speaking to organizations. But I think the problem that people do with fact finds is they go through the questions and they think they found the problem. So say, for example, I was running through the questions with you, and I asked you, Owen, what's your biggest challenge at the moment when it comes to bringing revenue in? You give me an answer. What's your biggest problem at the moment when it comes to onboarding? Well, we really struggle with getting reps within 12 weeks to have the knowledge that they need to. I've just found your pain point there, and I dive into that pitch. The thing that reps don't do enough is question that answer. So you've just said, we struggle getting them from 0 to 12 weeks up to where they need to be. Instead of pitching, keep questioning it. Go on, just give us a bit more on that, Owen. What do you mean when you say that? Why do you think that is? If I've found that there's a bit of a challenge there, stick in this box here. Stick in the box where the challenge is. Don't keep going off with your different questions. Yeah. And this is where it's difficult to structure, because when you get to the fact find, once you've found that pain point or you've found something that person might want improving, it's almost human nature to dive in and want to pitch and solve that problem. It is for me anyway. As soon as someone says to me they've got a problem, I'm like, how can I help with this? But you can't do that until you've properly diagnosed it. It's like the age-old thing of going to the doctors and going in and going, I've got a bit of a pain in my chest, and them going, you need surgery. You're not doing anything. You want them to prod and poke you a bit. You want them to put that thing on and check your heartbeat before saying what the problem is. And that's the thing for me that is difficult to structure and only really comes with experience, because once you've hit out of your 5 questions that you've got, the one question that you can hover around and stick around that, you do have to feel a bit of your way after that, because you can't script it. You can't plan for that.
I always used to say to the guys, there's no point answering questions if you're not going to do anything with the answers. And actually within each question, you've got so many sub questions. So you got your big question within that, your verbal nodding. That's what I call it. Sounds quite strange, but naturally not in a face-to-face environment. You can't see someone physically nodding. So, a lot of, yeah, okay, that's interesting. And then, a quick question back to them. Oh, that's interesting. What did you do about that? And suddenly that one question, you've asked 4 or 5 within the sub questions, and you've got so much information. Yeah.
Good point. I like the fact go on now. Go.
No, it's just there's a couple of different points actually. So Mark, I totally agree. Jonathan, I was just going to say actually one of those things that I think you were talking about actually kind of going further into those questions, and Mark, you said the same. There's no point in asking a question if you don't need the answer there. Actually understanding the impact of that, I think that's a great question. How does that impacted you? If you've taken 12 weeks to train up a new person, what's the impact of them not being trained up in that 12-week period? Actually understanding that's a really good thing. And then going back to your point, one thing that I was taught a couple of years back now, which actually was something around siloing. So going down and drilling deeper into that tertiary question, and then actually summarizing that as you go back out, so then summing up and actively listening back all the way up. So just so I understand that, Owen, so your big problem is this, is causing you this problem, and that's the impact of it. And, you spent this much doing it. Is that right? Did I understand that right? Yes. Okay, great. So just another question I wanted to ask, and then go into another silo. It's kind of going all the way through that. And then my actual view was that actually we use a very different approach actually in the way that our pitch goes. We'll go through this intro, short story, presentation, close, consolidation, and the reason why we go that way there is because it's high volume. We want to try and from a high volume perspective there, it's about going through and getting as many no's as we can to then get to the yeses quicker. And that was something that I think from a door-to-door perspective was especially important for us, is that you're not hunting for the yeses, you're actually trying to get to the no's quicker. Because I knew that my law of average was I needed to get 29 no's before I got my first yes. So as soon as I got my 29th no, I was like, game on, that's it. I'm getting my yes on this next one. In my head, I had that logic. So then I'm kind of drilling through it. So it was the same process, just applied as many times as possible. So our pitch will actually go through an intro like I walked through, a short story like I walked through, and then the presentation itself would just be the problem that we solve is this. Do you face the same problem, Mr. Customer? You do, great. What would probably make sense is for us to get some time in with our industry expert. When's best for you in your calendar? And then it's just, this is the problem we solve. Do you face the same problem? Yes, great. And then I've got the hook there. I can solve a problem that you've got. I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to solve it right now and give the golden goose away, but let's get another call in to talk about that. And then on that call, that's when I'm going into the discovery. Because I know that I'm speaking to the right person at this point. I know that they've got a problem, and I know that they're in the right industry for me. So on that 4th call, I can go to town on it, really understand their business, really understand what their problems are, and go off to that.
Does this specifically relate to a sector where you can be fairly clear that if they've got a problem, it's going to be that problem? Because it feels like certainly where we work, the problem could be it could be 3, 4, 5 different things. And if you're going to hedge your bets on one thing and get no's, you risk actually not doing the discovery to earn the right to know about it. So I'm guessing that works to a certain extent. Or are you accepting the compromise for speed? Are you saying, look, it's okay that we miss those ones that don't have that problem because we're going fast?
I mean, I think the problem that we address is a fairly common problem across the board, and actually that kind of positive business outcome that we offer from that is pretty unilateral across industry. The way it's framed in different industries changes absolutely. Like for example, the utility side at the moment, the problem that you're facing is that wholesale energy prices are going up. You've naturally had a huge influx of calls because of that. Is that right, Mr. Customer? Yes, we've seen it that calls have tripled in the last 3 months. Is that the same for you as well? Great. How would it be if you could, optimize what types of calls you're getting through and feed out the unnecessary ones? Would that be of benefit for you? Yes, it would. Great. Probably makes sense for us to have a quick call to talk about this a bit further. When's best for you in the next week or 2?
Really interesting. I'm loving the fact we've got different approaches here, and I think people will need to translate what we talk about and try and test these things and see what works for them in their sector. Really interesting, because I can see why that works in that sector. I think I'd struggle to see that working with with a lot of the stuff that we do. But I think where you've got something that's really clear like that, it's a great way, because you're going in, you're direct, you're getting to the point a lot faster. And I think there's benefits to that. So it's really, really interesting. Jonathan, can I come back to you? So we've asked some questions. In your example, we've got some what I liked about your kind of stay in the box scenario. So we say you start broad and then you drill down, right? You drill in. So once you find a pain point or an opportunity, it doesn't always have to be negative. It might be an opportunity that they've just had funding and they've got to go faster, and you can help them go faster, right? It could be anything. It could be a positive thing. But now we're in and we're doing our discovery specifically in that box. We're drilling in to find it. There must come a point where right, now's the time to move this forwards, move it into a meeting, whatever the next step is. How do you know that? Is it instinct?
It is. I'm just going to drill back down on that though, and like what we were talking about before. I don't think most reps actually get to the root of the problem. They don't actually get to the very bottom of it. They just stay on the surface level. And I think it's something that you mentioned before, Alex, which hit me, and I think it's something that I sort of do subconsciously. But asking the person, like, how does that affect you personally? Because we spend a lot of time talking about the business, the corporate stuff, and how's that affecting your EBIT, and how are you going to make your target? But just asking that person themselves, like, how's that affected you? What's that meant for you personally? Again, it puts you just on that bit of a different level. So yeah, just to go back onto that. Sorry, what was your question? How would you move it forward? How would you know it's right?
Yeah, so the instinct that knows when I've asked enough to move forwards and start to make a recommendation around a meeting.
Yeah, I think there's two things here. One, you're either going to qualify this into the next step, or you might be qualifying it out. I mean, when I cold call and speak to organizations, sometimes I can't help them. Sometimes they've got it nailed down. And this point for me is to go, do you know what? It sounds like you guys have got it absolutely smashed. This is part where, for me, I've developed a bit of a conversation, a small relationship. It's only going to be 15, 20 minutes that I've been on that call at that point with that person. But I've developed a relationship. They now know who I am. If we can't help them, I'd always follow up with something with them. Even if it is just, here's a blog that we wrote a while ago that I mentioned as part of the pitch that you might find interesting. All I'm ultimately doing here is making sure that that person has got an email from me with my name on it, with my face on it, with my details on it, because they haven't got the issue now. 6 months' time, they might have. 9 months' time, they might have. I want to make sure that I'm memorable enough for them to go, rather than Googling and going out to the world of people that they don't know, if they can remember me, the odds are we'll get something back. We get a lot of revenue back from that at the moment. It's not always now that people need stuff. If there is something there and something that I'm confident that I can solve, I close it, and I close it on the next meeting. Because for me personally, if I cold call someone, there's no way that I can do justice properly to my pitch that I can do if I'm on Zoom with them and I can show them some of the systems, show them some of the processes, show them some of the resources that we use, and I'll be wasting my time doing it. Our process is, once we've got interest, it's to book in that call with them, to book in that next point. But that's I think a lot of reps at this point, even if there isn't too much of a challenge, just on the off chance that I'm going to throw something out that they're going to go, brilliant, yeah, that is actually, I didn't realize I needed that, we'll start pitching it. You lose a lot of respect from the client. It's a waste of their time and it's a waste of your time. So if there's nothing there to offer them, make sure they've got your details in whatever way, shape or form, drop them an email. If you can help them, then close it on the next meeting. I always find as well that if I've done that fact find and they've given me a lot of information, they want to know why I'm calling. They want to know what I can do for them. So me going, that's definitely something we can help you with. We've worked with XYZ clients who've had very similar issues and we've managed to help them. Are you free on Thursday at 4:00? I always give a really specific day and a really specific time. So I just have a look at my diary as I'm talking to them, and I look when I'm free. I go, are you free Thursday at 4:00? Let me just check. Sometimes they're not even asking what for. They don't even ask why. They just give me a second. Let me just check my diary. Yeah, Thursday at 4 sounds good. Brilliant. Well, let's jump on Zoom and I can give you a bit more of an overview as to how we might be able to help you. I'll send you an invitation across. Then I've closed my next meeting. I think the bigger thing for me that people fear about cold calling is this idea that we have to close for business. Cold calling for me has never been about closing for business. It's about opening that relationship and closing the next step.
Yeah, fantastic. Marco, did you want to add something there? Alex is in. Alex, go.
I absolutely love that concept there. What Jonathan just finished on, closing for the next step, opening the conversation. I think that is amazing. And something that I always used to have that was drilled into me from a very early stage in my career was actually leaving people better than you found them. So I started on selling British Heart Foundation subscriptions door to door, £10 a month, and our goal was 3 subscriptions a day. and you'd be knocking on 250 doors. And the whole idea is that when you spoke to anybody, whether it was an old, young, woman, male, whatever, you were trying to leave them with a smile on their face better than you found them. That was the goal. And then if you signed someone up as well, that was even better. But your goal, your main goal, is that you're there to try and speak to as many people as you can and make as many smiles as you can. That was it. So I love that idea that you've got, Jonathan, kind of transitioning into the business space there of, closing on the next step, which is great. Also, one thing you talked about is qualifying in, qualifying out. One thing that I kind of progressed into is that when in our sales process now, we'll push through that pitch, not as rapidly as possible. If the conversation springs up, then we'll have it. But it's to get to that close step as soon as we can, build the impulse as quickly as we can, and close on impulse. And then actually what the goal is at that point, when you've got a date and time in for the diary, is to then try and qualify out. So it's then you've booked a meeting with that person off impulse. You understand there's a problem. Now try and drill them for questions as to why they shouldn't have your software, why they shouldn't have your service, why this wouldn't work. Just tell me a little bit about your digital marketing. What are you doing at the moment? Where are your problem areas? What's the issues? That kind of thing. Because now I've got a date and time in the diary where we're going to have a next call. And then really what I'm trying to do at that point is establish that there is value in us actually having that call. Is it worth my time actually having that meeting with you, rather than me being on the call on the phone, like booking another meeting at that point? And then something, I can't remember who it was, he mentioned it about, was that your question, Owen, about when do you know when's the right time? Yeah. So we used to do pitch practice, and we used to literally have a notepad that we'd hold up saying close on it. So you'd have two people that stood there pitching, and then everybody would just hold up their sign to say close when they were ready to close. And like we'd do that on the calls as well. We'd have like 5 or 6 people in a group that were all like on a conference call. Each one person's pitching, one person's the prospect, and then someone would just literally hold up the notepad and say close. And I think that is something that, from a training perspective, it's something you can teach, but it's something you need to start kind of getting the experience of, which I think is why pitch practice is an important thing. If you start embodying being that person that you had a negative conversation with the day before, and have one of your colleagues pitch you as that person, you'll then see how they would have reacted to it. And then you'll learn from that. And then again, it will start kind of developing that skill set of, when to close. So yeah, those are kind of my few points off that.
Love it. Marco, did you want to say something?
Yeah. My thoughts on this. This is the best part of the conversation. So we've got all of this on this information that we've ascertained throughout the whole call, and this is our opportunity to take his or her hand and guide them to the next step. So let's assume that this person is, the right person. We want to be talking to him or her. They're qualified, they've got budget, all of that great stuff. And the next goal is to get them into a qualified sales meeting, whether that's for us or whoever it may be. Let's assume that's the next goal. So this is where we take away words such as maybe, perhaps, probably. This is where we use words as, right, what we're going to do now is, the best bet is, my recommendation is to get something booked in. And Jonathan, your point around a time frame, you said, I think you gave one option, how are you fixed for 4 p.m. on Thursday or whatever. I've kind of used the same approach, but I give 2 options to say, look, I've got availability at Monday at 3 p.m. or Wednesday at 2 p.m. Which one works better for you? A big no-no at this point in the conversation is, how are you fixed for next week? Because they're going to say, I'm flat out, unfortunately. So you're giving them 2 options, Monday at 3, Wednesday at 2. So yeah, great point in the conversation, and it's about taking control of that conversation and guiding that decision maker to get them into that next stage conversation.
Love it. Jonathan's off mute.
The other thing I was going to say, and this is a mistake that I've actually made really recently, was at this point in the call as well, they'd already mentioned another decision maker needed to be involved in it. I didn't ask, is it worth bringing that person in? I carried on, got off it, high-fived myself, went, yeah, smashed it, got the decision in, got to the next meeting, ran through pretty much our pitch. And then they'd already told me earlier on that they needed to consult with another department. Me, who'd missed it. Again, if you've got, I don't know, vice president of sales and vice president of marketing there that you need to involve, vice president of sales messaging VP of marketing saying, I've booked this in for us to speak with Jonathan, is a lot easier if you can get them to do that. would you mind dropping them an email saying that we're going to be catching up? But always make sure that you've qualified. Is there anyone else needed in that process? Otherwise, it lengthens it. You've got to do your pitch twice because you've got to do it to that person and then to that person. It just moves it along. So if you can bring the other person into that second meeting, a lot warmer. You've already met with the first person, but there's definitely something to keep an eye on. I've done that very recently and was kicking myself.
Yeah, guys, I'm very conscious of time. Interesting comment, which isn't a question, but I think it's worth noting from our friend Nigel. Says, it's fascinating, but we can't ignore the data. If 83.2% say that B2B buyers, lead forensics, they're Al, your old horn, don't trust salespeople, surely we need to rethink what we've historically done, as what we've done as an industry has led to this statistic. I totally agree. I think it's a whole other point, and we can have another hour on that another time, I'm sure. But Nigel, very much appreciate the comment. Look, we're coming to the top of the hour, guys. I think we've covered a lot. I would have liked to have probably had another half an hour to dig a bit further in this, but I think we've got a range of views on each point, which I've really valued across this conversation. Just before we wrap up, Jonathan, I'll come to you first. Who should be talking to Sales Geek? How do they get in touch with you?
Give us a shout through LinkedIn, LinkedIn inbox. You can find me under Jonathan Finch, Sales Geek. Big thank you for having me on. Owen. I've really enjoyed this. It's made me think about some things as well, going, do I do that? Am I doing that? So I really appreciate you having me on. But yeah, anyone wants to talk sales training, we have got some free resources as well. Anyone wants to access free sales training, we've got about 550 short form content. I think there's quite a lot of your stuff on there as well, Owen. Just go to salesgeek.co.uk and just click on Sales Geek Hub.
Love that. Thank you. Really appreciate you coming on today. Alex, same for you.
So I'm on LinkedIn, absolutely. So Alex-Shrimpton at the end there. So yeah, just drop me in there. You jump onto our website, it's infinity.co. Basically anybody who is looking to understand what calls are coming from their digital journeys. So I know you're playing on PPC at the moment. If you've got people landing on the website there and they're making a phone call, not a form fill, you won't know that phone calls come from a PPC ad. That's what our technology does in a nutshell. So anyone who's looking to do that, just dropping us a line. Lovely. Really good succinct pitch there. Marco, do you want to do who should talk to you, mate?
Everyone. No. I'm on LinkedIn. If you give our number of calls through the website, you'll come straight through to me. So yeah, effectively anyone looking to drive revenue through sales and marketing, we're the ones to talk to.
Lovely stuff. Gentlemen, thank you ever so much for joining us. To people that have watched this on LinkedIn or through the live event registration, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for your questions and comments as well. It's been a pleasure. Have a good rest of the day, everybody.
Love it. Cheers. See you guys.